right, let's go. This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks. We're coming to you live here at Falling Knife Brewing Company. It's May 23rd. I got Britt, Robson here, Kyle Theige. That's here for Jim Petersen, who's coming out here. Woo! Yes. Kyle, Britt, yeah, we're down 0-1 in this series right now. And Jim, I want to start with you. What happened in game one that didn't go well that you think they can fairly easily change and adjust so as to get things moving in the right direction for game two?
I think a lot of things that adjusting happened was about Anthony Edwards. I think that Ant was not Ant yesterday. He was not, energy-wise, his energy was a little depleted, but some of the mistakes that he made, I think that were uncharacteristic of Anthony Edwards. So I think it's more of a, let's see if we can do the game plan correct this time than it is making a bunch of adjustments.
I'm with that, too. I think a lot of it had to do with just it being, or I guess my question to you would be, it being a different opponent. And the way in which that, Denver and Phoenix played, they're a very different opponent, and obviously you look at the Luka and Kyrie element of it. But what really stood out to me was the bigs and just how much bigger and more imposing Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford were at the rim. And I think in ways, to the Ant point, that changed his game. 12 of his 16 shots were three-pointers when, we've seen Ant trying to get downhill so much and get to the basket. How did you see that impact the game?
Well, they did a great job of gap help, and so Dallas is one of those teams. They had a lot of strips, too. Like, you think about all the dribble penetration. Guys were slapping down at the basketball, and they're stripping the ball. So they did a great job in their gap help. And, yes, their bigs are deterrents for sure, but I think some of the stuff that went wrong defensively, what happened in pick-and-roll game on the other side of the ball, too, they really gave up, a lot of points in the paint. Obviously, it was a huge disparity from that standpoint as well. So I think they need to clean up some of that stuff, too, that on the defensive end of the floor. Right. Offensively, yeah, you'd like to – Chris Finch was talking about this today about the 49 three-point shots. They could have taken more.
Yeah.
And I thought that for the most part, they, looking back at all the shots they took, you might want to make them work a little bit more, but I thought for the most part, a lot of the shots they took were good shots.
Britt, when you wrote today, you were talking about how, like, okay, we saw game one, and now it's you got to kind of show yourself here in game two. It was a different opponent. Energy was a factor. What do you anticipate they are going to show up and do here in game two? And kind of to some of the same questions I asked Jim, how much do you think they can? It is just a matter of, kind of flipping that switch.
Well, as somebody who thought that they were going to lose to Denver when they were down 3-2, I'm really not in a position to think that they're going to not respond really well in game two. I think that has been their history. I do think a lot of it just has to do with locking in and being more mentally focused and being more physically, like Ant, for example. I think there's a really fine line between testing a defense, probing a defense, and as you do that defense moves around a little bit. You see how the gaps get filled a little bit and everything. Ant did a lot of surveying without juking in, and you either get off the ball really quickly and not worry about that and get ball movement started, or I think you probe a little bit harder than you did. He kind of played in a no man's land that didn't accomplish either one of those things. And I find that I was disappointed in the way he played. I was kind of shocked that Kyrie dealt with that matchup as well as he dealt with it. Ant did not deter Kyrie in a way that I thought he would. I thought between Ant and Na on the ball, Kyrie is one of the best. I think he has the best handle, maybe him or Curry. One of the two has the best handle in the NBA. But I thought if any guys were going to get him to pick up his dribble, it would be Ant and Na. It would be two of the top 10 to do that, and they didn't. So I just think it's. I don't think the Timberwolves are worse than the Mavericks. I figured this series would be a 5 or 6 game series with the Wolves winning it. I didn't say that anywhere, but that's the way I felt. And so,
It's a good way to do it.
well, I mean, I've been right when I've been loud too, you know. But so anyway, yeah, I think that it is just playing to your strengths. Ant is feared when he has the ball. So probe a little bit, see what you can do, or get off it and move without the ball a little bit. But, you know, taking the air out of the basketball is almost as bad as those 1 into 3 drives he would do in the past.
Kyle, we were talking about this a little bit last night when we were going. I didn't have I understood offensively with Ant, like the temptation to take those pull-up threes, right? Like it hadn't been there with the way in which Phoenix was guarding him, the way in which Denver was guarding him, and now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm kind of open to step into this three here. I had less of a problem with the way Ant played offensively because I think just naturally, Britt, he's gonna get downhill a little bit more in game 2 and challenge Lively.
Why wasn't it naturally that way in game 1?
Because I think the big wasn't there. So he's like, okay, I can just shoot this 3. He could not do. I mean, Jokic was up every single time they set a screen. Nurkic was up every single time.
Okay.
That was there, and I understand that temptation. My frustration and watching the game back today was more so with what he was or wasn't able to do defensively, and I think that factored into the energy element that we were talking about, where Ant, he needed to have that offensive role, but he also had to guard Kyrie Irving, and as I'm thinking, and I don't know what like the answer is, but I would like more of Ant's energy, if possible, to go to the offensive side to the offensive side of the floor, and maybe not be guarding Kyrie Irving or Luka Doncic. I just don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds rudimentary, but they have more defenders that they can throw at Kyrie than they have guys that can score on offense, right? Like, so Ant, I know we always talk about Jaden's the barometer of good offense, and last night he was awesome, but it still didn't really matter. So the one play that stands out to me is late in the fourth quarter, 12 seconds left on the shot clock, and Ant just crossed half court because he was exhausted. So we talked about you don't want to blow all your fuel trying to defend. I mean, you want him. He's going to have to guard Kyrie on certain possessions.
Right.
But I definitely, and I'm curious for Jim's take and Britt's take, but if Luka Doncic is out there, I want Jaden on him. I just think he gives the best matchup. I think the length is a little harder for Luka to figure out because I think Ant defends more similar than Lou Dort does. And Luka clearly solved the Lou Dort thing in the last series. So, and I also just don't want Ant to have to expend all that energy guarding Luka when he has the ball that much. So I don't know what the answer is, if it's more Nikhil on Kyrie, or I mean, you can't put Mike on him, but I want Jaden on.
I mean, maybe. Like
Sure, but I want Jaden on Luka as much as possible with Kyle kind of filling in. He obviously earned some minutes last night, Kyle, with his offensive performance, but they just got to get more from Ant. And you're right, the big wasn't there, so he took a lot of threes, but this offense is predicated on him getting to the rim a little more. That's just how it builds up the rest of his teammates. So he's got to find ways to get to the rim more. What did you say? 2 shots in the paint last night?
Yeah.
And they were both blocked. And not by Derek Lively. It was by Kyrie and by P.J. Washington. So have to find more ways to get him going north and south and not east and west.
Probably, Jim, part of it is, I'm like, oh, Jaden on Luka or Ant on Kyrie. Part of it was Kyrie was just insane. In the shots that he was making.
Look, at the end of Game 7, when Ant was being interviewed and he said, "I got Kyrie," how many of you cringed? I mean, it was one of those things where it's one of two things. It's you love the vibrato of Anthony Edwards. That's Ant, and so when they were talking to Kyrie post game, that's one of the things that came up in the post game interview with him. Right, was like. That was motivation for Kyrie Irving when Ant said that, but Kyrie himself said that's why we love Anthony Edwards, because he has that bravado. And that's what makes me think that when this happens in Game 1, that Ant's going to come back in Game 2 and regulate this whole situation. Kyrie had 20 points in the paint in the game last night, so he had 20 of the
smallest guy on the floor, too.
And so he was in attack mode. And so, I mean, I was talking to Horton about this pregame, and I was looking at the splits for Kyrie Irving during these playoff run. And so he was averaging less than 2 points a game in the first quarter, and he was averaging 6 points in the first half and 15.1 in the second half. So 21 in the playoffs, but he was doing most of his damage in the second half. He had 24 points in the first half, so he was out there to send a message.
Yeah, and I think, Britt, how much of it can Ant or defensively can you do to to take that away. You know, I mean, part of it is while Luka and Kyrie kind of got theirs because Kyrie had 24 in the first half, Luka had 19 in the second half. You wrote about that today. The other guys weren't really all that involved, and I didn't notice this as much watching it live, but when I watch it back today, like the guys were staying home and not wanting to let, you know, PJ Washington hurt them from 3-point range in the corner. Like they only took one corner three in that first half when Kyrie was cooking in the middle of the floor. So I wonder if part of the answer isn't a little bit more help in there, particularly when it's, you know, when it's pick and roll, and maybe you not just guarding that with just Jaden and Rudy.
I think it's just going to be a different dynamic in game 2. I mean, what Jim said about Ant, I think he's going to be amped. I don't expect Dallas to shoot as badly from deep as they did in game 1, and that's going to change a lot of how you deal with Kyrie off the bounce. I think they're going to spread out a little bit more. I think it's going to be a much better played game by both teams, quite frankly. As for Ant on Kyrie, Kyle's right. I mean, there is an energy factor there, and I think, you know, for all his youth and everything, this still is the first time this deep in the playoffs for Ant, and it's a different kind of toll. It isn't a toll that's necessarily a physical toll. It's this idea that, you know, everybody's always on you. Everybody's always talking about you. You can't. You every time you turn around, you got to say something clever or just duck away, or, you know. I think it's a different thing. And Kyrie's won rings, and Luka's been in the finals, and I think the experience factor does come into play in terms of how one of the ingenious things that I think was really crystal clear last night that I hadn't really thought enough about is that Kyrie and Luka baton pass. They take 4 or 5 possessions off while the other one just deals. I mean, that's invaluable.
And that's not what Ant's doing. Like, it's both sides of it. Kyle, what are you just anticipating for game 2, or what, like, if game 2 starts out in the way that you want it to start out, what does that look like?
Just attention to detail. You know, like those games where we talk about the Minnesota sports experience all the time and how you fall down and you're just nervous and the scar tissue, but every time this team has had their backs against the wall, I mean, you don't avoid a 3-game losing streak over a 6-month period without having a little maturity and kind of resiliency. So I think tomorrow they kind of know that it is kind of a must-win now when you lose game 1. You know, you can still probably figure this series out if you go down 0-2. They're just better on the road. Right, 5-1 on the road this playoffs, 3-3 at home. But I think they're going to come out tomorrow with a little more desperation. I think it helps today that Finch completely lit into them, both publicly and privately. And
yeah, that dude was mad.
So I always make, this is, Jim hates this, but I make Jim do this all the time, a little bit of you played, I didn't. So Jim obviously, by the way, one more shout out to Jim Petersen, one more round of applause. The first All-American from the state of Minnesota for coming out. Second year of your career, you make the finals. But you've also coached with the Lynx for all those years and all those championships. As from the coaching perspective first, like, when the Lynx were come out in a game and just kind of, you know, just get rid of it or just not try hard and just not take their opponent seriously or whatever, low energy, what's it like? What were you and Cheryl saying in the locker room, knowing that, like, I mean, those series were best of 3, best of 5, but what's the coaching message to the players of, like, hey, you kind of gave that one away, you can't do that again?
Well, let me tell you, so, you know, when you're putting in a game plan, you know, you sit there and you watch all this video. And so it's one of the things that when it was my scout, you know, I'm watching typically 4 or 5 games of the opponent, and you're breaking down this video. And, you know, at the WNBA level, we don't have video coordinators. So, like, literally, I'm like the video coordinator, the advanced scout. I'm doing everything. And so you're breaking all down the video, and you're putting in the game plan. You're working with Reeve. We're having coaches meetings, and you're coming up with the best game plan for that particular series. And so when you play game 1 and they don't follow the game plan, that's very frustrating. So, you know, and I got to tell you, and I think Finch is like this, by the way, too. I think that he gets more pissed when he's sitting with the other coaches before they address the team at halftime. Because that's what Reeve was doing. Reeve was like, what the? You know, she's going crazy with us, with the coaches. And then she tries to settle down and have a message that's coherent when you're talking to the players. And so I think Finchie's like that. Finchie's like saying, like, what do we do? And so sometimes you go, do we, and you ask the players, like, do we have to change what we're doing, or can we just follow the game plan? Like, and I really feel like, and like, this is one thing, Dane, that we've talked about before, in pick and roll coverage particularly, because that's one of the things that is really important in game plans, is how you're going to guard mid pick, wing picks, step ups, all the different variations of pick and roll. And so one of the things, one of the reasons why points in the paint got out of hand was because, Rudy was dropped more than he probably should have been. And he's afraid of what ended up happening. If you looked at the video and you watched the video, so you saw all of Daniel Gafford's baskets, right? What happened in those baskets when Daniel Gafford scored?
Well, Rudy would engage Luka, and then he would throw it over the top.
So every time he engaged Luka at the point of attack to try to deter him, Daniel Gafford was rolling. And so one of the hardest things to guard is when the side of the floor that Daniel Gafford or any big is rolling to is empty. If the corner's empty, that's one of the most difficult things to guard, because when the ball handler's coming off the screen and the roller's rolling and there's no help on that side, all he's got to do is just throw it up, and it's like just lob dunk, right? The other thing is single side tag. If that player in the corner, and so when Gafford was scoring, it was Mike in the corner that was
not going to
defending.
tag a 7-footer.
And so what's Mike Conley going to do when Daniel Gafford's rolling to the basket? So Mike is the low man, is the tag guy. And I just think that's all by design. They're drawing these things up like that. So
Luka was weaving to get to that. Like, even if he was starting on that, he would get his way to the empty corner side so as to open that up. Britt, what do you like?
Yeah.
Do you sacrifice more of like leaving that corner open? Do you want to dare, essentially in a less smart way, dare other players to shoot?
Well,
which is if you brought that third guy in so as to tag Gafford.
I mean, I saw 44-22 advantage in points in the paint in the first half.
Yeah, you went.
That's
you
like
said, look at this. Look
that's
at
like
this.
an 88 point points in the paint average through a half. And so I asked Finch about it. I asked Mike Conley about it. And the first thing Finch says, yeah, as soon as Rudy went off the court, all they did is drive. So I looked, and he subbed out Rudy at like 4:45, and it was 21-15, and they got 3 baskets, and the last one was an N1. And Cat and Slow-Mo and Nas at various times were incredibly passive. They just watched it happen. And when was the last time Rudy had like a 2:30 rest? I mean, 2.5 minutes, Rudy was back in the game. He didn't play like 2 minutes in the second half. I mean, Finch just wasn't going to have that lack of rim protection and that lack of, view coming out. And when I asked Mike about it, I mean, did you guys tighten up? And he said, yeah, a little bit, but, and I said, was it coming up? And he said, well, the sidemen were the ones responsible for it. So, again, it may be that you have Mike Conley on a 7-footer, but Mike Conley's got to get in the way then, doesn't he? I mean, if that is the game plan, it may not be a perfect game plan, or it may be, I mean,
It's why the Gafford and Lively, or the Gafford acquisition is so valuable for them. When people are like, oh, you added P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, why has this completely changed Dallas? It's because I think every time Luka is in a 2-on-2 pick and roll, that lob is there. Like, those guys are elite. Go get it and finish it.
I get it, but, I mean, we had a little bit of the D'Lo syndrome last night, didn't we? I mean, the guys were basically getting
Scary.
to the rim without a defender with them,
Yeah.
and Rudy had to contend with that. So, I mean, I think that's part of it.
I think some of it, too, is that, when you look at Rudy, and this is going to be interesting to see how he does it, is that in order to defend Luka and Gafford both, you've got to try to play a 2-on-2, and you got to try to. So that's why Rudy's always kind of playing cat and mouse, and he's trying to engage Luka and Kyrie and ball screen, and mainly Luka. You're trying to engage him and deter him as Jaden is trying to get over the top and get back in front of Luka. And you're also trying to stay at the level of the screen under Gafford so he can't just go for the lob dunk. So really, that's going to be the interesting thing, is can Rudy do that? Can Rudy be able to engage Luka, let Jaden get back in front again, and get back to Gafford and not allow the lob dunks?
He did do that in the first half.
Yes.
The first half, it was there. The thing I'm concerned about is Luka seemed like he got comfortable a little bit with it, and how they were guarding him. There to some extent, Kyle seemed like he started figuring out the way in which Jaden was guarding him. Which, as when I was watching it back, it's like it felt like maybe you have to throw different looks here, because I think. I mean, Luka in many ways is like Jokic, where he's kind of got that supercomputer, as you said, to like kind of understand what is the path of least resistance there. And I wonder if part of the answer just has to be even just changing it just for the sake of changing it.
Yeah, he definitely got more comfortable in the second half. He also has subtle but effective ways to get guys off of him, especially Jaden, because Jaden just doesn't have the ant strength, right, to kind of guard him like a Dort. But at some point, though, you still kind of, with Jokic, right, they just said, you're awesome, and we're going to lose this series if you make a bunch of threes, right? And that's why in Game 7, like, Jokic has taken a bunch of threes, and he's missing them all. Like, you have to give these top 5 players in the world something. You're just like, if you do that, like the GOAT path in 300 that I always reference, like, if you find the GOAT path, we will lose. So it's something you're going to have to, like, Luka's going to do a lot of cool stuff, but you can't take everything away with Jaden or Ant or Kyle, but you just kind of have to hope that he doesn't find that GOAT path, which whatever that may be, taking a bunch of step-back threes, getting to the rim, and just try to close as many of those other, spigots of water as you can. So.
And then another thing, defense is a 5-man enterprise.
Yeah.
And Dallas plays Kyrie and Luka on the floor, both subpar defenders, and seems to do just fine walling up Ant. I mean, a good game plan, well attended to, and with the defensive talent that the Timberwolves have, a give-a-damn factor and a more adherence to the game plan and just digging in is going to forestall a lot of the problems before they happen, And then Luka is going to be kind of stuck doing an unenviable choice rather than which one of these nice choices do I want to do. If you put Rudy in a box, the fact that Rudy hasn't been in a box all year is why he was such a great roam defender this year, because he finally trusted his teammates. Well, he needs to trust his teammates again, but his teammates have to be trustworthy. And that was not the case, I think, enough last night. Even Jaden, who I think played really, really well, did kind of run out of steam a little bit himself and also was taxed more on offense than he usually is. So, I just think it was just a subpar game from energy standpoint. And I also think, like me, I think they may have taken Dallas collectively. Dallas had the best points allowed per possession in the NBA in the last 20 games of the season. From March 7th until April 14th, Dallas had the best defensive rating in the NBA.
Better than the Wolves, yeah. I do wonder, Jim, to just your point at the beginning, like how much of this is just solved just by energy. Maybe not needing to adjust the game plan and just going out and playing that action that we're fixating on right now of the pick and roll. If you just play that harder, I always reference to Kyle like those Denver and Boston games at the very beginning of the season, and you saw that willingness to stay attached, or that not willingness, just that ability to stay attached defensively and then to pursue on top of it. That's what totally changed my mind back in November of like what this team could be was like, okay, that's scary. Like that's scary defensively. And I'm always looking for that in the first quarter. And so much of that is just effort. Like it didn't always show up on a Tuesday against Charlotte or whatever against Portland. But when it seemed like they had more of that energy last night of it wasn't Denver or Boston or whatever. And to Britt's point, maybe just kind of taking that a little bit more lightly. To Jaden, I guess maybe on the other side of the ball, I mean, he was spectacular.
I can't tell you how much admiration I have for Jaden McDaniels.
Me too, brother.
And yeah, I mean, if you guys only knew how difficult it is to chase somebody consistently for every tick of the clock that you're on the floor like that, how hard that is to do and bring it. Jaden is so singularly unique in that standpoint. I've always said this. I've said it for years because as a coach, you love players that like really want to get through a ball screen. And so whether you get over the top and get back in front or whether you go underneath, just get through it. Like one of the things I loved about Ant in those last 2 games against Denver is that he went the fastest path. Whatever the path was fastest, that's the way he went. If it was over the top, he went over the top. If it went under, he really frustrated. And a lot of times when you go under a screen, I know when you go under a screen that you're likely to give up as the motorcycles go by. You're likely to give up a 3-point shot when they stop behind the screen and shoot it. But sometimes I think that's the path of least resistance. Is like going under a screen. Just get through it and stay in front. Don't make the big getting coverage.
Today's show is brought to you by Autograph, and we've been telling you about how Autograph is a one-stop shop for you to get all your Wolves content here in the playoffs. You just download the Autograph app for free in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Go to the Timberwolves community on there or any other team that you're a fan of, and all that team's content articles that you read from the beat writers or shows like mine will all be there in one place. How it works is by consuming content there, you get these fan coins, and you can apply those fan coins to enter different contests, get merchandise. They even had a ticket drop for free tickets for Game 1 at Target Center, and they're going to have more of those going forward. So we just want to put Autograph on your radar here as just kind of a nice place to get all of your Wolves content in one spot. You can use the QR code on the screen here to download the app. Otherwise, again, you can just go to the App Store or Google Play Store. And when you do, let them know that you came from us by using the code DaneMoore. Again, that's Autograph. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks, prizepicks.com, the Prize Picks app. We've been telling you about them all season. I always think it's kind of fun here in the middle of the playoff series to see like where the lines move, where they don't move, and how the numbers change. I was looking like, all right, how much did Jaden McDaniels move? I'm pretty sure his number was at 10.5 for points, more or less than 10.5 points for Game 1. It's 12.5 for Game 2. So if you think Jaden's going to keep rolling, you can take him for more than 12.5 points in your daily fantasy lineup at Prize Picks. My pick, though, for this game is going to be Anthony Edwards more than 6 rebounds. I was looking it up, and in the Phoenix series, right, Ant wasn't guarding the ball. He was playing off ball more defensively, and he was getting a lot more rebounds. He had 9, 5, 9, and 9 rebounds. He averaged 8 rebounds a game in the Phoenix series. But in the Denver series, when he was on Jamal Murray a lot more, kind of out of rebounding position, he averaged 5.1 rebounds in that series per game. This is, I mean, he's going to be on the ball a little bit when Kyrie has it there. But if you watched Game 1 against Dallas, you saw him kind of crashing from the sides there and getting a bunch of rebounds, and had 11 in Game 1. So I like Anthony Edwards as my pick for Game 2 to go to have more than 6 rebounds in that game. Again, if you haven't tried Prize Picks, you can do so at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. Use promo code DANE for a $100 sign-up bonus.
Well, and particularly if the screen's at 30 feet. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, Luka maybe can pull from there, but he's not.
I mean, the rule is once a player goes under a screen is to rescreen, right? And so, like, by definition, when you're rescreening, now the screen is lower, and that's the danger of all of that. But Minnesota has 3 guys that are elite level in negotiating screens.
And they have different styles.
And they all have different styles of doing it.
Cool.
But so Nikhil doesn't have the length to be able to deal with Luka Doncic. But he does have the ability to stay in front of Kyrie Irving. So
There's got to be more Nikhil on Kyrie.
It's got to be more Nikhil on Kyrie than it is Anthony Edwards on Kyrie. So that's the question. I love Kyle Anderson. By the way, we didn't even mention Kyle. Kyle was number 4, by the way, too. We love Kyle Anderson for that reason. We love the craftiness of Kyle Anderson because how many times have we seen Kyle in the last 2 years get a key steal against Luka Doncic and win a game? Back in Dallas last year, huge. He was huge in Dallas last year. So
He's going to be huge in this series, man.
Look, there were so many plays when you go back and look at it. And I think you can look at Ant at the end of the second quarter when he threw the ball in the stands 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, and so the one at the end of the second quarter is a big play because he throws it in the stands, and then Kyrie gets a chance to that's a 3-point play right there. That is, if you take that off the ledger, I mean, the clock was dead. Minnesota had the ability to run the clock out at the end of the quarter. So that's 3 points right there.
That was on the switch on Lively. Lively was on him?
Yes, yeah. And so you think about, the Mike Conley. What did Mark Davis say? He said, Subtle but effective. He said it was a subtle but effective push in the back. And, Bill Kennedy was the guy that was back in Secaucus. Yeah. There's no question in my mind. Bill Kennedy told him to say that on live television. Is there any doubt in your mind, Britt?
Oh, now that you mentioned Bill Kennedy, that's exactly what he would say.
Subtle but effective. I mean, and then Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, that Hawkeye system is somewhat flawed, I think. I mean, because the putback dunk that Cat had was just marginally inside the cylinder, but it was so high above the rim when he threw that thing back down. So it's end of the second quarter. It's the putback dunk. Yeah. It's the Mike Conley push. Like, it's little things. The Jaden turnover, too, that turned into the P.J. Washington 3 in the corner. I mean, it's 4 plays. And that's why this is what kills you as a coach, too.
And that was with weak effort.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. And so that's what kills you as a coach is that, do we need to change the game plan or do we just need to do it better? And so I think we just need to do it better.
Yeah. Kyle, to the Jaden offensive point, he scored 20 plus in each of the last 3 games. I was looking it up before this. He's in those 3 games, he's 12 of 18 from 3, 12 of 17 from 2 in those 3 games. I guess my question to you is that sustainable, or to some, or maybe not that shooting percentage is sustainable, but I really got the feel in these last few games for the first time that there's something more bankable to Jaden's offense than maybe there ever has been in the 4 years that he's here. And I think that, reading and stuff like that, like, oh, Jaden McDaniels isn't going to do that again. He's not going to make his first 4 or 5 threes in the game and all that. And it seems like the assumption is Jaden will go back to being kind of what he was during the regular season, the 5th option, maybe make 33, 34% of his 3-point shots. But does it feel to you like he's turned a corner offensively a little bit? Because I feel like it does to me.
I think he's one of the 2 or 3 most how much does confidence play a role players on this team. And he's clearly, to do it those last 3 games, those are the 3 biggest games of his career, right? Game 6, elimination game, Game 7, elimination game, and then this game 1 in the Western Conference Finals. So he looks like a guy that's really confident. We were talking last night. He's just, as soon as he catches in those corners, he's just letting it rip, right? And if he doesn't let it rip, he makes an immediate first step dribble to do something positive with the action. I think back to that when Murray challenged him in the corner and he just took Murray to the basket and dunked it. Like, that was a big play in that moment. So, yeah, is it sustainable to shoot what he's shooting? Probably not. But also, can you maybe pencil him in now for 15 points a game in the rest of this series? If you're getting that just helps alleviate a lot, because there's so many games this season when he shifted away. Last year his numbers were better because there's no Carl for 58 games. But this year he's had to kind of downshift again to be the 5th person to eat. But if you get 15 points a game from Jaden and 39, 41 minutes of really good defense, albeit Luka and Kyrie are going to solve him every now and then, if you can plug that in, it makes everyone else's life a lot easier.
It was the first game I can ever remember where Finch calls Jaden the barometer of the offense. That was the first time ever he wasn't, right? Where it was like, awesome Jaden game, but the offense overall wasn't awesome. I just want to say, for those of you here, we are going to, we're going to use Kyle's microphone here too, because we only have 4 mics, but we love taking questions at these things too, so Tom's standing right here. He's setting a pick in the Nas Reed jersey right over here. If you want to come up and ask a question, we'll talk about whatever from the series or otherwise. Just kind of again. Oh, you're ready to go right now, Nas Reed?
I want to chime in
for
a second on this. I forgot what I was going to say. So go ahead.
No. So that was 30 minutes.
Actually, I know what I was.
He's back. All right,
I'm back.
Log back in.
Back. I rallied. Jaden is the 5th option because the Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert pick and roll is such a dynamic duo. But that's not happening to the volume or the level that it was happening before the postseason. And so I think if you're going to get that Conley Gobert pick and roll humming, Mike was cold last night, but they're just not running that classic. Mike has a step back because Rudy's got both men kind of shielded. We haven't seen that nearly as much as we did before.
They were top blocking that though, right, Jim?
Exactly.
You called that. We talked about that like a month ago. You're like, that's not going to be a thing. Yeah.
But if that's not going to be a thing, then there have to be counters for it. And if it isn't something involving Gobert and Mike, then you do have to use Jaden, and you do
Yes.
make Jaden
Boom.
a third option.
These are my 3 smartest basketball friends. So one more time, round of applause for them. My role here is to drink beer and increase the vibes. And as Dane said at the top, these are not as fun when you're down 0-1, right? Or when you lose a game coming off a loss. But I got to pick Jim's brain on the coaching side of things. But as someone who, for whatever reason, has memorized his basketball reference, Jim Pete also did make the finals. Not the Western Conference Finals, but the NBA Finals in his second year. And I remember this, Jim, in your second year, on your trip to the NBA Finals, in the Western Conference Finals, you were down 0-1. And then you went off to win 4 straight. So you gave us the coaching perspective, but give us the player perspective and the mentality of, like, what are those guys thinking in there of being down?
Come on, that was 40 years ago. How the heck are you coming up with this crap, man?
That was
question,
true,
great
though.
question.
It's true.
It is true. You know what's funny? This is just incidental. This is the funny thing that happened. We lose game 1 in Los Angeles to the Lakers, and this is the Showtime Lakers. I mean, this is 1986, so they've been playing the Celtics the entire early part of the 80s, and we're doing a video session after game 1 after getting beaten, and Bill Fitch, our head coach, is they called him Captain Video because he was one of the first guys to use videotapes to instruct, and Rudy Tomjanovich was our assistant coach. Rudy T, a Hall of Famer, was our assistant coach. We only had 2. We had Carol Dawson, we had Rudy Tomjanovich. So Rudy T was in charge of, he had 2, can you imagine this? He had 2 VCRs, and he had to sit there and try to get clips during a game on 2 VCRs, stopping and starting and recording like on VC. It was just archaic, incredible technology, and Rudy hated it. He hated it. So
Not exactly second spectrum.
So no, exactly, it's not second spectrum. And so we're watching a playback of the game from game 1, and it's Chick Hearn. For some reason, Bill Fitch turns the audio up, and it's at the end of the game when they're playing. It's garbage time, and he goes, it's Chick Hearn on the call, and he goes, Craig Elo, who was one of our role players who never played. Craig Elo comes into the game at the end of the game, and he goes, Craig Elo's in the game. He plays about as often as you vacuum out the back seat of your car. So he just played it for comedic event. It was a funny thing at the end of the video
Craig Elo
session.
the guy who guarded Jordan when he hit
Yes,
the
like
shot
Craig
of the
Elo.
Cavs?
He left Houston and became a star in Cleveland. But
Back then he was that guy.
But so that was a funny thing that Bill Fitch played. So at the end of this video session, after we lose game 1, he plays this thing. We all laugh. We all leave. We go to practice, and we end up winning 4 games in a row, ending with Ralph Sampson. I don't know if you guys ever seen this video of Ralph Sampson hitting this crazy shot against the Lakers that sent us to Boston. So that's another reason why I want to get to Boston, by the way, and play in the finals, because Kevin McHale got my ring in 1986, and I want one back again.
Let's go.
Yes, this is motivation. I'm motivated
Let's go.
too.
All right, we can take a question here. We got a couple people here. If anybody else wants to ask a question, we'll take some here for a while.
I was just going to ask Kyle if he wanted a refill, but Dan is apparently a better server than I am, so. There we go. I just want to say how proud we are of our partnership with Dane and Dane Moore Podcast, and all you guys, obviously, Kyle and Britt, and then having Jim here is an honor. It really is. Like, I walk by you all the time in the stadium, in the hallways, and I'm like, Jim Pete, and you're like, hey.
Now I know who you are.
Hey.
I know you're beer royalty.
I'm that creep.
He brewed these beers.
So I guess thank you,
Tom.
Thank you. So proud. So back to the kind of the Jaden McDaniels thing. From a fan perspective, he's been kind of our quiet little secret for 4 years, right? And now he's finally kind of won his first real award, all defense. What is it going to take, or is it going to take for him to become like to get his national flowers per se? And does he deserve it?
Stopping Luka, man. I mean, this is he's got a test here. I mean, I was thinking about that actually last game of like, because he was doing the offensive stuff, right? That I would imagine for a lot of people out there who obviously maybe know the name but haven't really seen him play, you know, they probably have a little bit of a distorted perception of what he is. Like, oh, like this dude can get 20, you know, when in reality his role on this team has been a defender. It was you were there at practice today when Kyle was talking. Kyle Anderson was like, "That's my favorite player in the NBA," and it was when he's like what Kyle Anderson said. He is also Kyle Theige's favorite player.
Kyle's no for
Kyle,
sure.
yeah, Kyle's loved Jaden McDaniels, but it was interesting. He became my favorite player after when Kyle Anderson was in Memphis and they played him there. And what Kyle was saying is he goes, I'm so excited to see him get the opportunity to get shots, to have the 20-shot role. You know, Britt, we've talked about this for a long time of like what would that actually look like. And up until this point, I've always kind of thought it might not be what you hope it would be, but it does to me feel like Jaden has turned a corner into being more of like the two-way player and a little bit more of a two-way player than in the like Lou Dort, Dylan Brooks, 3-and-D guy type thing. Everybody ripped on me and Jace for comparing him to Dylan Brooks earlier in the season. I think he was that. And in his early 20s, he was that. But it does there's another level for him to get to. And to your question, Tom, I think that's what it is. Like, you can be an all-defensive player, but to get that real recognition, can you do multiple things?
I think that we are talking right now at peak Jaden McDaniels offense. So we have a little bit of a distorted lens.
6 for 9 from 3.
I mean, I think Jaden McDaniels can be a really competent offensive player. I think he still has to make his bones as a great defensive player. And I think Chris Finch really wants to have him keep his eye on the prize. Chris Finch doesn't care if he gets 20. If he gets 12 and plays Jaden McDaniels' defense, Chris Finch will feel actually more secure than if Jaden is getting 20 every night, because that means, you know, it's a natural thing. Think of all the great players who are 25-point scorers, who are phenomenal athletes, who can really defend well, but just stop doing it 100% of the time because it's hard. I mean,
tough.
Jim Pete's point about, you know, you chase people and it's thankless. I mean, it's like if you do your job well,
It's not thankless to the coaches
right,
and his teammates.
This is what Finch said today. He goes, well, listen, I thought Jaden was great. He battled all night long, got through 1,000 screens, many of those illegal too, and he just kept coming. He contested everything.
And that's what he cares about. He didn't want to talk a lot about Jaden's buckets. And again, I think the more we talk about Jaden McDaniels' offense, if he's a third option, getting between 12 and 15 a game on 50% or maybe like 55% true shooting, shooting percentage or something, that's fine right now. I think down the line, his role may change. But in this particular configuration of the Wolves, I don't know. What do you think?
Britt, I got a question for you, because everybody was talking about Mikal Bridges when he went from Phoenix to Brooklyn, and the scoring load that Mikal Bridges went from role player, spot up corner,
That's an excellent comp.
slasher, corner crashers, and so you're thinking about Mikal Bridges. He goes to Brooklyn and becomes a scoring stud for the Brooklyn Nets, carrying a lot of the scoring load in their ecosystem there in Brooklyn, and so. We're always comparing Ant to Michael Jordan. And so I think originally we kind of were thinking that Jaden could be Scottie Pippen. And so
Finch said that to
that's
Britt
Chris
in an interview.
Chris
and so-
Finch said that to you.
no, but so like why not though? Like, to me, this is the thing about when you play with great players. I played with some great players, and they just have this inner drive. And this is one of the things that I think people don't really understand about Luka Doncic, is how driven he is to be great. He is an assassin.
Yep.
He is so competitive. And talking with the Dallas people about his mindset, and then Kyrie's mindset too, because Kyrie Irving has a little bit of what Mike Connolly was talking about, do it for me, the do it for me energy. Kyrie is right now, he's all of a sudden in his 30s. He was just that 24-year-old superstar with Cleveland playing with LeBron James, and now he's a different guy. He's seeing that he doesn't have a lot of time left either. So you're dealing with two really competitive guys in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So you need to match energy. So it can't be just Ant being the guy. Like, you got to match what those two guys are doing right now. They're two of the greatest scorers. So I was with a buddy of mine who works for the league, and he's following the Dallas Mavericks because he decided before the playoffs started that the Dallas Mavericks were the team to follow. And so he goes, and even when it came to this series, he said, well, I just think that their two players are better than your two players. And that's basically the energy that he has with it. So, but I really think that those two guys are really driven.
But when you talk about energy, there's a finite amount of energy. I want 70% of Jaden McDaniels' energy stopping or meeting that energy.
Right.
I don't want it to be, I'm going to, keep moving without the ball, do some picks, and if I find myself in the corner and I see out of the corner of my eye that somebody may be leaking out, somebody else will get him this time because I'm going to hit this three. I don't want that mindset. I want the mindset of, you know what? I'm not going to the corner this particular time. I'm following that dude down the court. So I want the energy that Jaden McDaniels brings, and nobody is disputing his energy. In fact, he's a little bit of a maniac. I mean, that bounce try to make a slam dunk after the thing was clinched was just rude as fuck, I mean, it was just, I'm going to take a shit in the middle of your court play, and that's Jaden McDaniels.
It really is. It really is.
Court with somebody getting a silky 20.
He is such a middle finger to the NBA, like in these players.
He's really thin too. He's gotta fit it.
To answer Tom's question directly, though, when is he going to get? When is he going to get his flowers? Second team All NBA.
He's getting his flowers.
Second team All Defense. Like that's the flowers that he's finally getting. I thought he had a case to be made last year, but on an award that is voted on by the media, a lot of national people. That was a big moment for him, and I think it's cool. I mean, he probably could have been first team in my opinion, but to get that type of thing that says you're one of the 10 best defenders in the league, I think those are starting to be the flowers blooming.
You need to go to the NBA Finals to really get your flowers, though.
Yeah,
in order to really be bona fide, you got to make multiple playoff deep runs, and getting to a finals, you can get a lot of notoriety going to the finals. Trust me, I'm nobody, and I went to the finals once, and I got a lot more famous from one finals than I ever did in anything else I did in my life. So, no, that's what Jaden. That's what all these players need is they need multiple deep playoff runs to be able to get the flowers they really deserve.
They don't know that. Like, and Mike Conley's talked to us a little bit. Like they
don't understand how fast time
yes,
goes.
That,
they don't understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mike Conley was talking about this to us, and he was almost saying it was like an advantage in a way of like everyone's just out there like just still hooping, and kind of irregardless of not what the stakes are. Like they're competing requisite to the stakes, but it's a bizarre roster, right? Man, you got like 36-year-old Mike Conley, like Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, who are desperately trying to like define their own personal legacies, and this is their opportunity to do so. They're in the conference finals. And then you have like Jaden, Naz, and Ant, who are children,
Can I just tell you something? Because I've talked to a lot of my friends that have been around the NBA recently, and everybody watched Game 7. And one of the things that they have now come to really adore about Anthony Edwards, and I would be curious to see, because you guys have been around him as much as anybody, one of the things they love about Ant is the humility that he has and the way that he's able to give. Talking about giving flowers, the way that he's able to kind of deflect the credit that he deserves and give it to his teammates, the way that he credits Karl Anthony Towns, the way that he credits Jaden McDaniels, and the emotional IQ that he has, because you're comparing him to Jordan. That dude never did any of that, and neither did Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant wasn't wired up that way. Michael Jordan wasn't wired up that way, but Anthony Edwards is wired up that way. Have you guys ever asked him? Because I haven't. Has anybody ever asked him where he got that from? Like, where do you get that emotional IQ that you're so willing to be this incredible talent, but yet still willing to be able to give people the credit they deserve to build them up and make your team bigger and better?
I think Anthony Edwards has incredible EQ. Like,
where did he learn it?
Honestly, like
is he an old soul? Is he?
No,
just
I think he's country. I think he's country.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, I think he's from Georgia. He reps Atlanta, but that's just because that's the city down there. But he is a country kid who was raised by strong women, and I think that a lot of that comes through. I mean, the compassion that he has and the maturity he has, he is a kind person at heart.
But he's a killer. He's a killer. He wants to rip your throat out. He wants to collect heads. That's what he said.
On the other hand,
That's what I'm saying. He's like Jordan and Kobe, but he's not like Jordan and Kobe.
He's not. Go
I
ahead.
was just saying, like the leadership thing. You and I love that little video post game. I can't remember what game it was after. Maybe 6.
it was after 6 or 7, maybe. No, it was after 6.
It was
It was
at
after
home.
6, right?
But when he just is like, "Hey, Finch, like, let me say something quick," and he looks at Carl and he's like, "You did everything we told you to do tonight that we talked about this morning." And it was just an organic, holistic moment where Carl also accepted it. Like, to Jim's point, he has built up. What did Jaden say after Game 7? This guy gives me all the confidence in the world.
And
he
he,
points at
more
Ant.
than anybody else. He said that my teammates give me confidence. Ant gives me more confidence than anybody.
Exactly.
And you have a lot of confidence players on this team. I mean, Jaden, but Nas and Nah are huge confidence. I mean, those guys need to feel like they're going well to go well. And who does Ant shout out more than anybody? Jaden McDaniels.
Jaden.
I mean, at the end of the day,
They got Kevin Durant. We got Jaden McDaniels.
But that's why to the bigger Minnesota sports thing that I try to lean into, he's 22, Jim. He's probably not like Michael Jordan because he has that leadership characteristic of building others up. He's not like Kobe. He is Ant. And he takes pride in that. Like, I'm not those guys. I am this guy. And if you live in this area and you guys are all like, if you're from here, that's why you got to go to games and live in the moment and be where your feet are because down 0-1 sucks. But this kid is special. I mean, he told Jamal Murray, like, we love when you talk shit. And then he backed it up in 6 and 7. And I'm excited to see what he does tomorrow night after a game that he brought low energy.
But look, like, I when I talk to my friends around the league and we talk about our team, Anthony Edwards makes our team special because we have a connectivity. I think, and I tweeted this a couple weeks ago before the Phoenix series, is that our superpower is how united and connected this team is from top to bottom. And Mike is a big conduit. There's no doubt that Mike is a big conduit, but Ant is too. This is a team that's super tight and close. I think they really play for each other. And how many teams in the NBA are like that? I think you can see OKC's like that.
right. I have a theory on that, a couple of theories, actually. The 3 of the last 4 columns I've written a bit about chemistry because it's, to me, the dominant thing about this team.
It's true.
There are 2 things. I think one is Chris Finch.
Absolutely. And Ant said that last game.
Chris
Last seventh
Finch
game.
holds everybody accountable and doesn't make it personal. And if you can do both of those things, if you can call people on the carpet and have that happen, and if you notice Finch, when Ant was worrying about his knee and all this other stuff, and everybody's going, why the hell is Finch being such an asshole? Nothing wrong with his knee. He's fine, and all this other stuff. It's like, let's get those types of habits out of your head right now. And Finch also says all the time, he lets me coach him hard. And Ant says he holds us all accountable, even the leaders. It's the Tim Duncan pop thing. However you want to play it, you go at your best player harder than you go at anybody else. And if you're Chris Finch, who really knows how to communicate with people, you do it well. Those guys have a great mutual admiration society. And I think that's one of the reasons, because one of the things Flip Saunders always told me is your locker room starts from the top down. And if your top guy is on board, almost everybody else is on board. The second thing I would say about chemistry is you cannot play the kind of defense the Minnesota Timberwolves play and not love each other.
100%.
I mean, you think about the times you help your friend move or you help your friend put in a garden.
That's good.
or you
That's
paint,
good. That's
paint a
good.
house or something like that. There is that collective endeavor when you're hard work with somebody, you're closer to them at the end. Well, these guys have been doing hard work every day for 6 months and exceeding beyond any of their previous accomplishments. They love each other for that reason.
And you know what? And all you really got to look at is just go back to the video of Game 7 against Denver and look at the energy between the Denver Nuggets bench and the Timberwolves bench. The energy that they had on that bench, and it's one of the great things. So Rudy Gobert, during the middle of the season, we're in Milwaukee, and Grady is at the arena before I am because I don't need to be there an hour, 2 hours early. No one needs it. I mean, you guys need to be there 2 hours late. I don't need to be there. 15 minutes. Yeah. So I walk into the arena and I look at the court and I look at the Timberwolves are warming up opposite their bench end, and so normally the Timberwolves warm up on their bench end on the road, and on the road you get to choose which end you warm up on, and Rudy had been pleading with Finch and the coaching staff to have the team warm up opposite their bench end so that in the second half, their offense was on their bench end side. And so you talk about vibes. I mean, you're the master of vibes. Rudy Gobert might be the ultimate master because he's the one that wanted it to be switched so that when they're down at that end, when Rudy's shooting free throws in the fourth quarter, I'm just imagining this. This is nothing I know.
He's rubbing his crystals.
Instead of being clowned by the Clippers,
Yeah, that's good.
instead of being clowned by the Clippers in the fourth quarter, he's got his guy going, come on, Rudy, let's go, baby. So we're on the road. You wonder why we were a good road team this year? I think the vibes were a big part of it.
And
that was all Rudy.
That's all Rudy. Yeah.
And on defense, they're away from Finch, and
Rudy-
Rudy could
yes.
call the shots.
100%.
He was playing 3D chess there. We'll take another question here. I wanted to say one more thing about the Ant point to your question you had there originally. I probably covered. I mean, Britt, you've covered maybe thousands of Wolves players. I've covered over 100 at least, and Ant is the only player that I or we have asked questions to that is not thinking about the way in which the answer is going to be perceived. All other, if there was 100 of them, all other 99 of them, and some of them to really big degrees, like what is this going to look like on Twitter? What is this going to look like when it's typed out word by word? Ant answers.
Bring your ass.
Bring your ass. Exactly. And there is something to that. And that is a genuine attribute. And I would imagine in a locker room, because I do think that that's Ant's genuine self, whatever that is, has such profound leadership power.
Well, there's a word for it. It's authentic.
Yeah.
He's authentic.
I thought you were going to say one of your words.
We don't have to look it up.
All right, let's grab another question here.
I love the howler, by the way. This guy's got a howler on
A
his
howler
neck.
chain and the stash. Let's go.
Thank you.
Get
So
him
my
on
question
camera.
was, it's a little more down. So Rudy Gobert had a play. I don't know if you guys saw it. That he kind of did the vintage cat move where he's complaining about a call. He got fouled while he was trying to get a rebound, or he thought he got fouled while he was trying to get a rebound, and so he's pleading to the refs, and they're going down, turning a 5-on-4 into a 3-pointer, and then we lose by 3 points. I think I've seen a lot less of that this year, and that's the first time I've noticed it in the playoffs. So I was wondering if you guys have seen more or less of it this year in the playoffs, if you think somebody's going to talk to him about that one.
Let me take this one, because Jim and I were talking about this before we recorded, that complaining to the refs, right? The Wolves do a lot of it. But no one probably does it more than Luka in the regular season. And if you noticed last night, there was a couple questionable Jaden McDaniels that I would have been like, oh, that might have been a foul. I didn't see Luka complain once last night. And whatever happened, whoever got in his ear, maybe it was Dirk, maybe it was the coaching staff, the Wolves the Wolves have brought down their complaining, but I thought last night the Mavs had 0% complaining, and that stuff, again, is just, I think, spirals all the way back to the energy, the focus, the attention to detail. You can't have any of that. You can't have any of that. Britt said it too. It was a pretty well-officiated game last night, outside of a couple subtle but effective plays, that you just can't have any of that. And you can't have it from Rudy, who for 82 games of the regular season was probably maybe their most professional, consistent person out there, other than Mike. So it's a great observation, but you just have to clean that up as well, because any advantage that you give the Mavericks, because you're complaining, Ant, Carl, Rudy, is a transition opportunity, and you have to be tight with all those little details.
I thought it was shocking how little complaining there was. I remember, I don't know if you guys heard this when you were watching the game 1 of Pacers-Celtics. Whoever was calling that game was like, there's really been no complaining in this game. And I'm sitting there on the couch, and I'm like, just wait until tomorrow. Luka Doncic, Anthony Edwards, and Karl Anthony Towns. Like, this is good. But it didn't happen, you know? And I don't know, maybe it's just because it's the playoffs or whatever. Like, you get to that point where you're like, maybe these aren't hills I want to die on because it actually kills my team. There was less of that. But it is, to whoever asked the question, to your point, like, that's 2 points. And in the regular season, I think you let that happen. Or 3 in that case, yeah. But even the, like, Nas and Karl, when they drive to the basket, the falling over sort of thing, like, those guys are popping back up. It's all that stuff because I think there is an understanding, right, that the margins are just so small in the Western Conference Finals.
Well, you know, with Anthony Edwards on TV, you know, we have the mics, the baskets are mic'd up, and the hay. I think the hay has even been lessened a little bit.
Way less hay.
He
He
way
stopped
less.
respecting the hay.
Yeah.
They're playing for real now. And
Yeah.
you can't work the refs because it's the finals. The refs are not going to be worked. They're under the microscope themselves. They're getting to work in the finals because they are the people who make the best judgments according to all these algorithms about what happens. And everybody out now is just trying to do the best they can and may the best person win. And you can maybe play mind games on the margins, but you can't be working the refs in the middle of the Western Conference Finals and have it be effective if you're losing your mind. And I will say that I notice that Rudy he is so competitive that his fourth quarter, if Rudy Gobert wants you to challenge a call in the fourth quarter, you immediately say no.
No.
You don't even
No,
look.
you don't trust
You
the big
don't
guy. It's my
even
philosophy.
look.
You don't trust the big guy. Don't trust the big guy.
But I mean, he wants to win so much that he just regards it as another possible avenue, you know? And so I think that part of what happens is when you get angry at the refs is you think it's going to make an impact in part because you feel like a victim and you want to say what you say, and then you can argue, well, you know, now he'll know, or, you know, none of that matters now. And I think that, you know, maybe there are examples. I've got to think when I've seen a lot of NBA games, and the people who are losing their minds at the refs almost always are on the losing side at the end of the night.
I am deploring. This is a segment of what Target Center will look like tomorrow. I am just begging for no more refs you suck chant. Because I just honestly actually think there's a psychology. We talked
agree.
about this. That I think the away team builds off that. And I think the home team, in this case the Wolves, kind of leak into it. So if you want to get weird and cheer bad calls, do whatever. But no more refs you suck chant. Just chant Jaden or Nas Reed. But I think that stuff kind of seeps into a team that has been way more professional and way more mature. But if they know that they're getting screwed in the moment, I think sometimes it just leaks into their brain.
My guy Frank over here, who was at the game last night, who's filming
That
this
was Frank's
for us,
take.
He was texting me. And he's like, "These people need to shut up." Yeah. Let's take one more question here. That's
Hey,
a
guys.
sick shirt.
Thanks. You guys already talked about all the threes the Wolves took in the last game and the points in the paint disparity. And probably the most concerning thing for me watching game one was just the amount of never minds the Wolves had when going at the Mavericks big guy. Shout out Michael Grady. But they were...
As you pointed to your head.
That's a Kyle Theige right there.
Where was I going? They were almost treating both Gafford and Derek Lively with more respect than Rudy Gobert gets from other opponents. And it felt like at a certain point, they just need to challenge those bigs and either make them deter the shot or get them in foul trouble, whatever it may be. But I'm a little concerned about the Wolves being able to do that, considering like Dallas has been doing this to teams, like you guys said, the last 20 games of the season. They did it to SGA in round one, who leads the NBA in drives per game on guards. Still had a great game six, but that was all. It felt like it was all on mid-range shots, and they were closing off the rim and making those OKC role players make shots. What can the Wolves do to close that points in the gap, points in the paint disparity, and start to finish over and around those Dallas bigs?
Jim, do you want
That's a great
like
question.
Ant to just go at that? Like, go at Lively? Because I think I don't.
Well, so one of the things that they looked at when they were getting ready for the Phoenix series was because Phoenix was really at boxes and elbows, and they had the primary defender, and they had gaps filled right and left drive. So wherever Ant drove, whichever direction he drove into.
It's like when they have 8 in the box in football. You know, like probably shouldn't run it here.
It's impossible. So one of the things they had two things. They did peel action, which is basically if Ant is handling or if Mike is handling, what you could run a phantom screen to be able to get defenders to get off of him. And
Malik Beasley. Think Malik Beasley. He ran that all the time.
So anyways, this is getting into the weeds, but peel action or also a boomerang pass. So Ant has the basketball, and he has it, and they're loaded up on him, and he gives it up to Mike, and then Mike, now the defense shifts, and then Mike throws it back to Ant, and then he's able to attack because the gap is shifted.
Yes.
And so it's things like that. And that's where Finch is a genius, because when we sit there at practice, you guys aren't privy. I wish you guys were privy to see what we see.
So do we.
Me too.
I know. It's just great. But to see
they don't trust us.
To see Finch work, it's so great. If I could only, even with the immobilizer brace on, and he's sitting there on the sidelines, he is in full control. He's over there. He's like saying, "Let's do this, let's do that," and they've got counters on top of counters. So they run a base play, and they have so many counters out of it, but it's a read, and that's where he goes in the game plan, where guys aren't following stuff because they aren't doing things correctly. Is that they aren't making the proper read out of the action that they're trying to get out of. So that's where he gets disappointed, is that they aren't following through on what he's already taught them. So they have to be reminded. And
so the tangent I go on sometimes when there's a regular season game where it's a lot of that. They're not maybe effectively making the read. What I go to in my head is this offense needs more structure at this moment.
There's structure. There is structure.
I know, and there is. So I'm wondering. I think it sounds like when I say it, and I probably am saying it, is like, Finch, put more structure in here. How do you get more structure in those moments?
You don't want structure. You do and you don't. You don't because you don't want to become predictable, and that's the ultimate. Chris Finch.
But what if everything is unraveling?
There is structure.
I know I know there's structure, but
it's
I
hard
think
to
it's often the
explain it.
players who are not executing the structure.
Did you play in the Western Conference Finals?
No, and
No,
I'm not Chris Finch.
it's a way more complicated game than it was in the '80s. That's for sure. And I'm just telling you, Chris Finch is a master at being able to teach it. He is so good at being able to teach it. And so my thing
that's
is
my point is it's execution.
It's
of
execution,
the players.
and what I'm saying is that they're going to figure it out. Because this team has always figured it out. Don't you agree?
I would not say always, but I would say vast majority of the time, yes.
When there are problems that pop up, Chris Finch has fixed a lot of the problems.
First of all, I think it was an excellent question. First of all, shout out to the questioner because I think he nailed it in terms of Lively is amazing. He's a rookie and he is a force. I mean, he does
big as hell, man.
He does the right thing on defense, and he is a hound on the boards. I mean, what was he like, plus 16? They were plus 16 with him in the game, and P.J. Washington, the guy
plus
who
19.
Plus 19. What was P.J. Washington? Minus 15?
Plus 12.
No,
Gafford was minus 15. That's what
okay,
you're thinking.
the guy he replaced. That's the guy I meant.
Yeah.
All right. So, but essentially, he's just got youthful energy, great hops, and Sean Sweeney, who is a very, very good defensive coach from here, I think, isn't he?
He's from St. Paul. I went to Creighton Durham Hall.
St. Paul. But essentially, he has put together a defense that has guys like Gafford and P.J. Washington who came over, and then holdovers like a rookie Lively and Derek Jones Jr. All those guys mean to do is mess things up for the other team. That's like 90% of their job. And then to hit an open shot when Luka draws 3 people to him. I mean, it's a very simple assignment, and it is a daunting challenge because they are so dedicated to their task. To Jim's point, which I finally got around to, I do think that Chris Finch understands this dynamic, what those people are in the game to do and how they're able to do it, and will figure out counters to it by which judo-like he uses their full-flung aggression against them, probably in the counter ways that Jim Pete is talking about. But if not in those counter ways, in ways where, maybe you get Mike Conley open for a wide open three because you've done some action where everybody is thinking, stop the rim, and the other guys are over on the strong side. You have a weak side Mike Conley, you have a weak side three from Cat in the corner. I mean, there are ways to do this, and maybe that's one of the reasons why Finch says 49 threes, maybe not enough. Maybe you see these guys really, really living in the paint at both ends of the court, and you feel like one of the ways to get them out of the paint is to just rain on them,
Rain like from deep? Yeah.
No disrespect to the late, great Flip Saunders, who kind of had the first installation of the Minnesota Timberwolves being really good, and that's how I became a fan. But these two guys, I've said this to you before, these two guys right here have said, Chris Finch, to answer your question, best coach in 35 years in Minnesota Timberwolves history.
Not even close.
I imagine
Flip Saunders taught me more about the NBA game than anybody who has ever come across my path, and I am always indebted to him for that. But Chris Finch is a better coach.
So to the answer to it all and put a bow on it, like, I will bet on Chris Finch, right? I will bet on Anthony Edwards, to Jim's point earlier about bringing it tomorrow. It is 0-1. It's a tough Thursday, but Friday, block party. All the streets are closed downtown. Go Wolves are chalked on First Ave. I imagine a much better performance tomorrow from a team that has been down 3-2 to the defending champs and had to go win a Game 7 in Denver. This is not over. It's a long series, and I imagine Finch and his crew and Ant and all those guys in the locker room, we've got a lot more basketball left to play.
I wish I could have a video in front of my eyes of what I saw sitting right next to the Wolves bench in Game 7, because Horton and I were sitting right there. I mean, like, Chris Finch is right there, and the bench is right here, and all the stuff that was going on when they fixed it, like, Ant was 1 of 7, Mike was 1 of 7, Nikhil was, 0 for 5 at halftime? Yep. I mean, there was nothing that was going right in the first half, and then they were down 20 because they came out in a little 5-0 run, and we're down 20. And when that 8-0 run happened, if I could just, like, it was amazing to me, like, because it's so great. And Horton was freaking out because he's always up there at the top of the lower bowl or whatever. Grady and I are a lot of times sitting right by the bench, but we're right there, and, like, you've got Pablo fixing stuff. You got Micah fixing stuff. You got Finch fixing stuff. You got Chris Hines, who's Anthony Edwards. He's like patting Ant on the. You saw that, right? You saw him during the timeout. He's like, yeah. I mean, you got all these coaches. They're fixing stuff, and I'm just saying the energy of what these guys, the connectiveness that these guys have together. The players listen and they execute.
That's the point. That's the thing.
The players listen.
The players listen. There's a lot of smart coaching staffs in the league, and I don't mean that to take away from the Wolves one, but I think what the brilliance of Finch is he's found a way to connect with the players in a way that is accrued trust that makes them listen in the middle of a Game 7.
And the assistant coaches too, though. I'm telling you.
Yeah, the whole
like,
staff.
No, but a lot of times when head coaches are talking, nobody else is talking. There's no other coach that's talking. There's multiple coaches fixing stuff, like, and so when they were blowing that lead up, man, and it was like dwindling, and all of a sudden Minnesota at the end of the third quarter, Ant hits that shot in the corner. I was like, I mean, it was an amazing thing to see. And
Look at that first half box score.
Abysmal. Rudy was 0 for 3. I mean, it was Cat and Jaden, and that was it. Basically,
Cat
right?
and Jaden scored it. Other than that, 3 guys made baskets in the whole first half in a game that they won in a Game 7.
The other part of it, too, is that Timberwolves fans, man, I love you guys, man. I love Timberwolves fans because they travel. And that corner of the arena behind the Wolves bench, there were so many Wolves fans. I can't even tell you. I love you people. Wasn't it?
It was nuts, man.
When they were making shots, it was like a home game, wasn't it?
It
was so loud in there.
Let's go, and then the Denver fans would like get pissed.
They were so mad. They were so mad.
Yeah,
it was. I'll never forget it. It was one of the great moments in my 26 years of broadcasting games for the Timberwolves. Was that Game 7? Greatest game in Timberwolves history.
Here's a point I want to make. How many color commentators would regard that as a blessed moment. How many color commentators would be right next
Yes,
to
sir.
the coach and going, I am witnessing a great thing happening here. This is why you're the best in the game when it comes to this stuff.
Thank you, Britt.
You are, yes, sir. Let's hear it for Jim Pete.
Action items.
Jim's
Pete-
easily the smartest podcast we've ever done.
And I was part of it. That's crazy for LinkedIn. Jim Pete, Minnesota Zone, St. Louis Park, down 0-1 in the Western Conference Finals, found a way, went to the finals. That's your action item for tomorrow. Very long series still. It sucks to lose the first one, but I expect to see everyone downtown at Target Center. Happy Friday when you start listening to this. But long series left, and Wolves in 6.
It's gonna be fun, man. This is gonna be awesome. Thank you for all of you who are out here today. Those of you on YouTube, thank you for watching. Jim, really appreciate you being here. Kyle and Britt, all year I obviously could not do this without you guys. I did not think we would be doing an outdoor podcast on May 23rd of 2024, but this is awesome. It's been, I mean, my favorite year since I've ever done.
There's no doubt. And I was talking to Kyle and his folks about this too, because we were talking about Canis Hoopus, and I always talk about the brotherhood that we have, and the way that this team is covered. This team is covered better than any team in the NBA. Maybe Boston. I mean, those guys in Boston are pretty good as well.
No, we got them.
But to me, it started with Canis Hoopus. It started with Canis Hoopus.
Sir.
It did. It started with Nate and with Tim. It started with Nate and Tim, and I was telling Kyle, I was like, is Canis Hoopus like All in the Family, like the greatest? Like, you think about all the spin-offs from All in the Family, like Archie Bunker and Edith Bunker, and like you got the Jeffersons out of that, you got Maude out of that, and you got Good Times out of that.
Yes.
And so, like, from Canis Hoopus, you got Kyle, you got Dane. I mean, Britt's his own thing. Britt's like is singularly unique, and like he's the professor of this whole thing, and he kind of runs the show. But like,
Britt's the Simpsons.
But Dane, I'm so proud of you though. Like what you've been able to build, and obviously for you to create this and this partnership, and your podcast has become one of the most listened to podcasts in the NBA. I'm just really honored to be a part of this too by being here. And so when you guys asked me to come, I was like, I couldn't say yes fast enough.
Thank you, Jim. This is super cool, and for me, and the one thing that Kyle and I were right about all along was there was a shit ton of people out there who loved the Timberwolves. They might not have been at Target Center at Wes Johnson, Derek Williams game 20 years ago. But there has been a group of people who have watched you on the broadcast for forever, have read Britt for 20, 30 years, who have listened to this podcast for a long time, that cared about this. And that is, I don't really have the emotional investment in it in the way, but I do have the joy after a Game 7 for everybody else. I have so many friends. I mean, we were talking about this, Kyle, after.
I'm not crying on another podcast.
No, man.
Wrap this up.
I had over 700 text messages after Game 7. A lot of it was like my stupid friends in my group message. But it was a lot of people who I know have been listening to you and Dave and Grady for a long time, and it was the thing that they did after they put their kids down to bed, and it was a personal hobby, of theirs, even if the team wasn't good, because there's a basketball culture here. That's something I've known since I played, a long, long time ago, and for the state of hockey, there's a love of basketball here, and this is the first time in my life I've seen that be applied to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that's really, really cool, and it's really, really cool that all of you are here. Many of you are watching, listening. There was like 1,000 people here last night at Falling Knife watching the game, where everyone's sitting right here. It's what we envisioned, right, when we were like, let's do this thing, because we knew that there was people here. So thank you for saying that. Thank you, Britt, Kyle, for being here. Thank you for all of you here. Let's see where this thing goes. I don't think we thought that we would be here on May 23rd. We got a lot of basketball here to come. So for Britt Robson, let's hear for Britt Robson, Jim Petersen, Kyle Theige. This has been awesome. Thank you all for being here. Yeah. Until game 2, he's Kyle, he's Jim, he's Britt. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.